2. You know, being from the South, I don't get the opportunity to smallmouth fish a lot. You know, I grew up in Arkansas. There's a handful of lakes in Arkansas that have smallmouth. Basically, the only time I'd get to fish for them when there was a tournament there. So still to the day, that's still what I get to do. But regardless of whether you're smallmouth fishing in North Arkansas or smallmouth fishing in New York or Michigan, to me, one of my favorite baits has been forever and is a tube. And the thing I like about a tube, for me personally, having a jig fishing background, is simplicity. It's basically just a hook and a bait, much like a jig is. It's hard to go wrong with it. It's easy to tweak, and Strike King has made it really easy. Like on their whole, they have a whole line of smallmouth tubes, and that's from a 3.5, a 275, and then a 2-inch Bitsy tube. And the one thing I found out here, we just recently fished at the St. Lawrence River. I caught 95% of the fish I weighed in on a tube, was that as the conditions changed, I had to tweak my tube. In practice, the fish hadn't been fooled with much. It seemed like they hadn't seen a lot of baits. A 1/2 ounce head, 3.5-inch tube was the deal. The other cool thing about it is how you put the head in. And so basically in practice, this is actually the tube I caught a lot of the fish on the last day of the event. But you see how the head goes inside the tube. It just makes for a super natural presentation. And a lot of times what I do in practice is I just pop the hook off right there. Take a pair of pliers, snip that off, and now I got a weedless, hookless missile that I can fire 200 foot, and you know, those fish will eat it and they'll tell me where they're at. And the other cool thing I like about bombing a tube like that is, most of the time on my active target, I'm only looking 100 foot. So I got it turned out to 100 foot. But while I'm panning and looking for those fish in flats on Lake Ontario, I have that tube in my hand and I'm throwing it 200 foot. And so the deal with that is, even though I can only see 100, I may get bit in that direction at 200, and then I'll know to go and look that way. So I see guys, you see a lot of guys now with the front facing sonar, they spend all their time looking. I'm still that guy that likes to make that long cast, because I'm throwing in different directions, and you may be looking this direction and get bit 200 foot that direction, and that will have a tendency to make the boat go that way. So it's always a good idea, because smallmouth in the north a lot of times are living on featureless flats. They like to roam on those places. So it's good to still be making those casts while you're doing that. And you can just cast a tube farther than you can a drop shot. Like that, it's like a jig. It's like having a 3/4 ounce jig rigged on. You can throw it 75 yards and you just cover a lot of water with it. Now, the one thing with that being said, I started practice with that 3.5-inch tube and thought it was the deal, and ended up weighing one fish on it during the event. And as the event progressed and we went from having rough conditions to slicker conditions and really high skies, it was really important for me in that event downsizing from the 3.5 to the 2.75, just a lot smaller profile. Now, the one thing I did, I was throwing a 1/2 ounce head in the 3.5. I threw a 3/8 ounce head in the 2.75, and you got about that same rate of fall. A lot of those fish were suspended. The other thing, the type of caster I am, when I would see those fish on my active target, it's easier for me to cast that single bait to them, if that makes sense. I could hit them with it. And you know, I've been around smallmouth before. When you got within 30 foot of them, they would come get the bait. As fishing pressure has progressed, maybe because of the weather, whatever was going on there, you needed to brick them. And what I mean by that was you needed to hit them right on the head. That bait had to fall directly on top of them to get them to bite. And it was just really easy for me to do that. It was also, it seemed better to throw at them at basically 65 to 100 feet than to let them get any closer to the boat. It seemed like once they got inside that, they started to feel the boat, they would be attracted to it, no more bites. So the tube just made it, for me personally, it's easy to hit those fish with that tube. But probably the only thing I didn't do, I wish I had have even spent more time throwing the Bitsy tube, which is 2-inch. But it just seems like as these fish are getting more, you know, more pressured, it's more and more important to go to a smaller profile bait. But the other deal is, I caught 10 or 15 gobies a day, and it's crazy how much those gobies look like that tube. So whether the fish were eating crawfish or gobies, that tube just does a great job of representing that. And to some extent, I feel like it's went by the wayside. People have forgotten about it. But it's one of those baits like a jig and a rubber skirt that will stand the test of time and will be around as long as bass are.